And welcome back to an episode of the Clear Jets podcast. We're hosts Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Michael, it's Senior Bowl week. A lot of buzz and excitement going on with that, especially with the Jets coaching. So a lot of draft stuff we want to get into. We have a special guest in the line as well. But first, Michael, most importantly, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. And with the Jets coaching the Senior Bowl, it has been a very eventful week for news. We've gotten some huge news regarding the future of this roster this week. So it's really kind of added an extra event to the offseason for us to follow and kind of consume, have something to talk about. So it's definitely been really interesting to kind of extend this offseason schedule, give us some early content to take in.
Absolutely. And it's tough to not love September football, especially for the Jets, because that seems to be the only time they're really relevant, I guess, the last few years. But I love February, March, and April in terms of football season. I just love free agency and preparing for the draft and the draft itself. So it's a fun time to do podcast, and I'm grateful we get to have one of my favorite voices in the Jets community. And I don't want to butter our guest up too much, but he is one of the few voices that I will sit down and watch an hour and a half, 2 hour podcast because Michael and I record one of our own. But it's none other than Joe Blewett, who is Jets X Factor's resident film expert. He also hosts the Blitz podcast. Joe, I stumbled in your last name there a little bit, but it was kind of a famous, for like a few weeks there was Chris Blewett, the kicker. Did you take any offense to all the name jokes that were being made about him after he was missing kicks this year?
No, I really couldn't care any less because I've heard it for my entire life. So like when I hear it now, I'm almost numb to it. Like if somebody actually comes up with a good joke I haven't heard before, I'll laugh at it. But anything else I've heard 1,000 times. Like how many times do you tell me I blew it? Like that's original. So no, I'm pretty numb to it. 28, about to be 29 years through life.
Yeah, you're a little older than me, but I got enough of the Jets comments coming, arriving to school on Monday morning, through middle school and whatever. I can't imagine if my last name was also Blewett and being a diehard Jets fan where everybody knows. I mean, that's just, I apologize. I mean, I feel bad for you a little bit, but it is a cool last name. It works for a kicker. It builds character. Exactly. It builds character. There's a ton to talk about. I mean, there's stuff looking back at last season. We mentioned the Senior Bowl, getting ready for the draft. So I think we're just going to jump around a lot here and touch on a bunch of different topics. I think let's start with in terms of noteworthiness or, what's on people's minds right now. And I've been looking at a lot of mock drafts because it is draft season. And I keep seeing the Jets. And it seems like, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like right now the best case scenario, if the Jets are going to stay at 4 and not trade down, for a lot of people, is to take an offensive lineman. It seems like Ekwonu seems to be pulling ahead of Neal. I feel that way. I believe you do as well. What do you think about the options at 4? It seems like Ekwonu's the guy, but at the same time, is there a bit of an issue of where do you play him in a line that consists of Becton and AVD? Maybe not an issue, but at least a discussion. It's like, okay, this is a guy that's only played the left side of the line. Are you moving him to the right side? Can he play guard? What are you doing with Becton? Do you keep AVT at left side? Just there's a lot to take in with that pick. So how are you feeling, a few months out from the draft with Ekwonu seeming to be the consensus guy everybody wants at 4?
Yeah, well, I obviously, ideally, it's Hutchinson or Thibodeau. But like, what are the chances?
Right.
Even though like there have been some questions about Thibodeau coming up now, and like some people questioning his character, which again I'm not, but it's been floating around a little bit. You have a guy who I don't listen to a ton of people, but Daniel Jeremiah seems to be pretty plugged into the draft, and he's having him fall to the Jets at 4. So is there some questions about him? So can he fall? Maybe he does. I don't think he's the level of the Boses and the Chase Youngs that come out in the past, but if he's there for the Jets, and obviously they're comfortable with who he is as a person, you take him. But with that being said, he's probably not going to be there. Like, let's just expect not to get the pass rusher we all want. So I think past that, it's really those two guys and Ekwonu. And even past Ekwonu, like, I am not a Neal guy. I am not. Like, if they take him at 4, I will not be happy with that. I think in the class where Becton came out, he would probably been the 4th or 5th tackle. And to be completely honest, for a guy who's 6'7", 6'8", 360, 370, whatever he is, he's pretty soft to me. And I think his technique is pretty terrible in the run game. So I would not be happy with that pick at all. So I'd really be hoping for a trade down or Ekwonu to fall to the Jets. And yeah, there's a conversation like, listen, he's played left side only. I think I don't want to be the stats guy because I'm not going to take over Nani's job with that ever, but I think he played 300 reps at left guard. So he's always played on the left side. Now moving to the right side, like people again, in Madden, you move from left tackle to right guard. Maybe he loses at 1 overall point, but it's not like that in real life. Like you're doing everything the opposite. So is it a question if he can do it? Of course it is. I do have faith in John Benton, the offensive line coach, who's obviously been there, done that type of thing. And I think Ekwonu, just based on what he puts on all 22, he has enough work ethic, or it seems like he has enough work ethic where he would be able to get that down. And I think he's a better fit at guard. I literally just recorded his film episode probably about 6 hours ago from recording this. And he has some problems in terms of being a tackle. He doesn't have the best movement skills. His feet are a little bit clunky in pass sets. He has a massive tendency to shoot two hands, which when you shoot two hands, it's great. But the problem is when you miss with two hands, your hips are locked. You're pretty much screwed at that point. And his feet tend to kind of plant when he's shooting as well. So it like multiplies the problem with his pass sets. So he has some struggles on the outside in terms of pass setting, but in the inside, it would be much less, it would be much more minimized. But in terms of the good, obviously there's plenty of people who watch more film than I do, but I watch plenty of it. That's for sure. And since I've been watching, he is the most aggressive offensive lineman I've watched in 5-6 years. Like there are plays that I put up last night on the live stream. I don't know when this is being released, but a couple nights ago on the live stream, he is literally chasing people after the play. Not just like, oh, this guy's in my area. Like he's like 5-6 yards away, full sprint down the field, chasing guys to lay them out. Really good power, good size, tough player, effort. Really good in terms of his awareness of angles in the run game, doesn't overcommit in the run game, attacks the hip. Like there's a lot of good things, and hopefully go to the film show. I'll give the whole list, but Ekwonu seems to be the pick there. And with that being said, like long-winded answers, I'm known for that. I think he's a guard. So I think you put him in at right guard, and a lot of people, okay, well, after year one, do you switch him to tackle? I'm not. I think positional value is almost overstated. If he's going to be a really, really, really good guard, then keep him at guard. Like Quentin, I'm not comparing anybody to Quentin Nelson, but people say, oh, you can't take a guard in the top 5, top 10, whatever. Quentin Nelson at 6 has been working, obviously pretty well, even though that's obviously the biggest example of that, like the best example I could possibly use. But still, if Ekwonu is a great guard, keep him at guard. You don't have to switch him to tackle. I don't necessarily want him to be okay from the left side to right guard, now back to right tackle. I don't want to move him around a ton. So I would prefer Ekwonu, plug him in at right guard. Then you have Becton, hopefully healthy. You have Fant. You have AVT, you have McGovern, who had at least an average year, if not a plus average year. And your offensive line, with all that being said, especially considering the jump they made, the leap they made at the end of 2021 season, that should be fighting for a top 10 offensive line. And then Joe Douglas really kind of came true to his promise about addressing the offensive line and making it a powerhouse unit. So I'll be completely okay with Ekwonu at 4 for the Jets, and I think he would fit in really well with that, tough trenches type mindset that Joe Douglas has. So
I agree with you. I mean, I'm completely happy with Ekwonu at 4, even if he is a long-term guard. I'm curious to get your take, though, especially in this offense. Let's say Becton's healthy. Let's say Ekwonu can play left or right side. And obviously, I guess in that case, you would keep AVT at left guard. Where do you see do you think it's better to have Becton and Ekwonu playing right next to each other? Do you think that would yield the best results? Do you think it's better to have, because they're both just so violent in the run game, do you think it would be better to have Ekwonu as the opposite guard with AVT next to Becton? I mean, how would the ideal setup be? Is it, him at right guard and whoever loses between Becton and Fant at right tackle, or are you more strategic in the way that you would line these offensive linemen up?
I honestly don't think it really matters all that much who plays next to each other. Like I think, the idea of like him playing next to Becton and them just absolutely planting guys is obviously like that's the dream. Like they could literally throw guys like 10 yards. Like they are that powerful. So if I had to choose, again, I don't think it matters all that much. I say you'd want a little bit more finesse next to those guys. So if there is stunts and twists next to them, guys like Ekwonu and guys like Becton, they can move, but they can't move as well as guys like AVT and Fant. So you'd almost want to split up the power. So you don't have an overly athletic right side and a powerful left side that can't really move, so you'd almost want to like split up the athleticism versus the power. So I would say it would probably be him at right guard and Fant at right tackle. But with that being said, though, like I honestly don't know if Becton's going to win the left tackle job over George Fant. Like George Fant played really well the entire year, and I know Nani put out that article about him not playing top competition, but he easily seems more comfortable at left tackle. That's when he had his upswing in 2019, and that was probably one of the main reasons the Jets decided to move on him, because he was a guy who obviously didn't play a ton of tackle, didn't get a ton of starting reps. He came in and left tackle in 2019. That's the reason I was behind that signing. One of the very few people who was. I was watching every single game. Every single game, there was improvement, little improvement, little improvement, little improvement. And for a guy who didn't play a lot, that was really encouraging for me. So he proved at left tackle with the Seahawks. That's why they signed him. They told him he would be a left tackle. He came to the Jets. Then the Jets draft a left tackle. And Becton, he has to move to the right side where clearly he's not as comfortable. So I don't know if Becton wins that job. And it's like, with all this Becton stuff coming out about the nutritionist, and that the Jets haven't like straight up come out and said the whole thing about like Becton, like, oh, he's overweight, he needs more commitment. But there's been like little nuggets in the media here and there that are a little bit odd. And obviously making him now compete for the left tackle starting job kind of like, again, multiplies that. So, do they have concerns over him long-term in terms of his weight management and his dedication and all that stuff? I think the injury concerns, there's something that it's something to be concerned about. Like, listen, even if you had a completely clean bill of health, when you're 370 pounds, you're 370 pounds. Joints are not made to hold that much weight, regardless. So even if he wasn't injured, it has to be something that you're mindful about. And year one, he played in 12 to 14 starts, but how many of those starts did he come out with or come out of? And then obviously in 2021, it's not really a problem of his own, because it doesn't matter if you're 370, 380 or 280. If your leg gets rolled up on, your leg gets rolled up on. But I'm more concerned about the injury problems in 2020 than I am in 2021. So I would say it's depending on where Fant and Becton actually line up, but I would say kind of split the difference with the power, if that makes sense, even though, like I said, it doesn't really matter too much to me.
So I'm curious to talk about the secondary a little bit. And obviously the biggest name in terms of the draft is Kyle Hamilton at the top of the class. And he's a guy who I think, before I got into the film or researching at all, just conceptually with the way that he was talked about, the way that he was hyped up, kind of made sense to me. I would be okay with taking a safety with that 4th overall pick if he's a player who's worthy of it. But after getting into it more, at least for me personally, he's a great prospect, but I don't know if he's great enough for the Jets in their position to take him at 4. I think you have agreed with some of what you've watched on film. So kind of talk about what you've seen from Hamilton, where you would be comfortable taking him, and whether you think he is in play for the Jets.
Yeah, I was, and we kind of talked about this pre-show. Like, I was firmly on, okay, if he's generational, like you're talking about like Derwin James coming out of FSU, but healthy Derwin James, like a guy who could, play high safety, low safety, could play linebacker, could blitz, could match up with receivers, and was really clean. Like, you have to be a really clean prospect to be generational. Like, your technique, your understanding of offenses, of concepts, the athleticism on top of it all has to be squeaky clean. And I didn't see that. And people will say, oh, well, technically you could work on the technical stuff. That's easy. Okay. Then why there's so many failures in terms of technical stuff? It's not that easy. Like, if you could just work on the technical stuff, then Vernon Golson would still be getting sacks. Like, you can't just say that. So I was definitely disappointed. I think in terms of his athleticism, being 6'4", 220, he has generational type athleticism. Like, I think if he gets to the top of his ceiling, like, he's a guy who could legitimately, match up against a Gronkowski. He could blitz. He could fill in the run game. He could play cover 1 as a deep safety. He could play cover 3 as the middle safety. He can match up with any tight end, any receiver for the most part, other than like the really slippery ones. Like, he could do everything. Even though when I watched, he was a little bit more or less involved in the box than I thought he would be. But I watched FSU, Toledo, and Purdue. And if they get drafted by the Jets, I will be watching the rest of their seasons. But he had way too many mistakes for me to be considered generational. Like, I saw the athleticism, but in those 2 games, he missed 2 tackles. One, run up the middle. It was a GT counter, an OF counter, whatever. Runs right up the middle, and he takes a terrible angle to it and breaks down really, really early. Lets up an extra 40, 50 yards right there. Another time, I forget exactly what the game was, but the run's opposite side of him. The running back's running up the sideline, and he takes a really aggressive to undercut the receiver and try to get to whoever's carrying the ball. And it was just a terrible decision, like, not just being Monday morning quarterbacking, but he has to flip his hips, be a little more safe, and let the pursuit get to him. And he just didn't do it. So he missed two plays in the run game in 3 games, which is not a good percentage. Ashton Davis was good for one of those. And obviously we're all not very high on him at this point. At least I'm not. And then there's multiple plays in coverage where I was kind of dumbfounded. Like, he gets really flat-footed in coverage. He depends on his athleticism a lot to kind of match guys at the top of the stem, but he doesn't have, like, he's not in his back pedal. So if he gets beat, like his arms get beat and he is not able to completely hold the guy up at that point in his route, he gets burned. Like, there was a couple times where he got burned where the quarterback just didn't get him the ball. There was a one time where he was the robber and it was like a 3-by-1, and he's supposed to be looking at the inside threat, the number 3 coming from the passing strength, and his eyes are just locked onto the quarterback, and he's driving down the middle of the field in a robber, and he just completely misses where the receiver catches the ball because he's staring at the quarterback. He never sees the receiver. And that should have been, for any average safety, even in college, it should have been either a play where he absolutely destroys the wide receiver, at least gets a PD, if not an interception. And he just completely took himself out of the play. Another play, cover 2. He's obviously, split 2 halves. And it was just a 2-man concept. If one of those receivers goes short, then you're pretty much in man coverage on that second receiver if he stems 10 to 12 yards and it's considered a vertical route. And his leverage is so bad, and it's so far inside where he's not, like, air quotes, like weaving the over the top, basically just like moving sideways or laterally in a back pedal, weaving. And he doesn't get over the top of it, and the guy just outbreaks on like a smash concept on a corner route and is wide open. And he catches the ball, and Hamilton doesn't even get close to defending the ball. So, like, there are way too many lapses in coverage and in the run game for me to consider him generational. So where am I comfortable taking him? Definitely not 4. If it is 10, there better be some guys off the board who I've been watching. Like, you're talking about him versus Karlaftis right now at 10. Obviously, depending, let's just say it's Icky at 4. I'm taking Karlaftis over him. I'm about to watch Jermaine Johnson, but if he's deserving the hype he's getting right now, maybe I'll take him over Kyle Hamilton. If they do if they do get one of the edge rushers, you're talking about, Linderbaum, Green, if maybe Sauce Gardner, like all those guys, I think I'm taking over Hamilton right now. So I'd be okay with him at 10, but I wouldn't be ecstatic like I would be 3-4 weeks ago.
Staying in the secondary, the cornerback position is an interesting one to kind of project in terms of how they'll attack it, because their history, both Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, kind of points to them not valuing cornerback too much, whether it's San Francisco, how the Niners approached it, Joe Douglas with Baltimore, and then the Jets, the couple years that they have been together, not a ton of high valuation on the cornerback position, but it can be seen as a need right now. So I'm curious about how you evaluated the guys on this roster in 2021, looking at Hall, looking at Eccles, and Carter II, mainly those 3 guys, and how you value cornerback as a whole. So 2-part question: how did you evaluate the starting corner trio on the Jets this year, and how do you value cornerback as a need going into this offseason?
So starting with the first part, we went into the season with Hall, and we thought he could be a starting corner. Because he showed those flashes in his rookie year. And I think he built upon that season enough to say we're comfortable with him as a number 2 corner. I think towards the beginning of the season, with the pass breakup numbers, all that stuff, we're like, okay, he could be a really good number 2 corner, maybe even like a low tier number 1. I never felt that way, especially towards the end of the year. He got beat up versus the Bucs pretty badly. He got beat up versus Gabe Davis pretty badly versus the Bills. To me, it almost seems like he has some confidence issues in terms of staying square at the line of scrimmage, and he opens up a little bit early. When you open up early, when you open that gate, you're letting guys get past you, especially when you're not as athletic. You're not ideally as athletic as he should be as a corner. And he's not taking advantage of his main, strength, which is his strength and his length. And when you're opening your hips up, okay, now it's more of an athleticism type game instead of like technique and strength type game at the line of scrimmage. So I think he is a number 2. I don't think he's ever going to be a number 1. I just don't think he has the necessary athleticism to do so. And it's not like saying, oh, well, there's never been receiver or corners who, haven't been like wildly athletic to be number 1s. Like Richard Sherman, he's not wildly athletic, but his technique was as good as it can be when he was at his peak with the Seahawks. And to say that Hall can make that leap is obviously a leap in itself. So I think Hall, though, with all that being said, it's proved he could be at least number 2. But again, I don't think he's some lockdown 2, great number 2 like we might have thought earlier, because he definitely had his lapses that people didn't necessarily notice. Like, I'm sure Michael, I'm sure Ben, like how many times was he beat over the top and the ball just either wasn't thrown or wasn't connected on. So the stats look good, but really, if you look at the process, it wasn't necessarily good. So I think he's number 2. I was a little bit disappointed in the year, like I said. Eccles, listen, like anytime you could even say that a 6th round pick in Eccles is a role player, that's a home run for a GM. So I think he's a home run pick. But I think people get that confused with him being a home run pick with saying, oh, well, he should start. And of course, when you talk about like film and all this stuff is like people make 1 or 2 highlight plays a game, and that's all people remember because that's all that shows up on broadcast, especially with the guys in the secondary. So he makes one or 2 picks or a pass deflection a game, but then what's happening those other 58, 68 reps, whatever it may be. And I thought he was wildly inconsistent, even though he had a couple of flash plays. And I think he would be a good number 4 or number 5. But Eccles is not a starter. And then past that, McCord the second, I think he proved himself to be a starting slot. I don't think he was some lockdown elite slot corner. Like he had some deficiencies. And I think maybe some of the part of that with like the stats comes from the fact that like how many times was he matched up with Gesicki, with Dawson Knox. Like there were some times he was there, Kyle Pitts, like they were putting him on tight ends, which is obviously ridiculous for a guy of his size, but he's 5'10", 5'11". So that's not ideal. But I think he showed enough where I'm comfortable with him in the slot. Hall, I'm comfortable with him as a number 2, and I'm comfortable with Eccles as a 4 or 5, and even Guidry as a 4 or 5 if they are to bring him back as a backup slot guy. So we need a number 1 corner. So it's a massive need, and I think a lot of people, again, with the positional importance, all this stuff, and like bringing it back to Saleh, like Saleh when he was with the 49ers, like they did bring in Richard Sherman, unless I'm unless I'm mistaken. Like they obviously brought in a pretty high tier corner, and I think just because like Saleh and his defense is more predicated on the front 4. That's fine, but since when does that mean corners don't matter? Like I haven't gotten that whole corners, safeties don't matter, because tell me why out of either position, corner or safety, in what system do they not matter? Because I don't get it. Like I get the emphasis on the front 4, they cover the corners, but it also works vice versa. Even though I prefer the defensive front, but cover 1, cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, cover 5, cover 6, like in what system does corner not matter? So they need a lockdown. Now, does it need to be some high tier JC Jackson guy? No, I don't think the Jets would do that. Maybe it's a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round. Maybe they bring in, Stephon Gilmore for $12, $13 million a year for a couple of years. I'm kind of just throwing a price out there, but maybe they bring in something like that, a vet corner. Like everybody's not going to be able to have like youth on this team. So they might do that. But to say like, oh, we don't need a corner, Eccles is fine there. When you're wanting to compete and Eccles is out there, then you're going to feel much differently about it.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of adding a Gilmore, but I mean, it all comes down to your board. I mean, because they have so many picks. I mean, it's just if there was a corner there in the 2nd round, I definitely wouldn't hate it. You bring up a great point about how people mention the importance of different position groups on this team, and people try to downplay the importance of corner. Obviously we know that the Jets as a whole believe in the trenches. Offensively, obviously, offensive line, and then defensively, it's like we have to get after the quarterback. We have to build up the defensive line. But between linebacker, safety, and corner, obviously the Jets are a different variation of weak at all those positions. I think it's interesting that the Bills, who have the number 1 defense in the NFL, I mean, when you look at that defense, Tre'Davious White was hurt, so I'm not going to count him. But where's the strength of that defense? Linebacker and safety, which are 2 out of, if you're looking at defensive line, corner, safety, and linebacker, those are the 2 that you would say maybe are least important. For this defense, where do you see those other 3? Not defensive line, but linebacker, safety, and corner. How would you rank them in terms of importance? And then when you factor in the level of need that the Jets have there?
Well, in terms of importance, I think it kind of matches like other systems. Like I'm pretty much always going to say in terms of ranking those like 3 positions, really regardless of the, like, obviously, yeah, there's some systems that put more emphasis on stuff like, okay, if you're running a zone and you have some help for a corner, versus running, like a cover 2. Okay. If you're playing a curl to flat, yeah, it's less important than a system that's like going to be heavy, cover 1, like Revis putting them on an island. So yeah, like there are some systems that it matters a little bit more, a little bit less, but still in general, they ran plenty of cover 1. What was it, probably like in the 40% ish? That's risky saying that with Nani on this, but something like that. They ran plenty of 3. They ran 4. They ran 6. Like they ran plenty of defenses. So, and every system really does. So I would say in general, corner, probably linebackers. I think they're a little bit more involved than safeties, and probably safeties 3rd. But in terms of need right now, it would probably be safety number 1, because like going into next year, who do they have? They have Ashton Davis and nothing.
They got to pay somebody.
Yeah, there's no Riley. There's no Red One, who you don't want them playing anyway. Joyner's gone. May is gone. So they need 2 starting safeties, like absolutely 100% need that. And then I would say past that, they need a number 1 corner, which it doesn't need to be JC Jackson, but I think a guy, like what's his name? Dante Jackson from the Panthers, or
Xavier Rhodes.
Xavier was like they need something out there because Eccles, again, while a home run pick for a 6th-round pick, he is not a starting corner at this point. And then linebacker, a lot of people I saw there was like stuff floating around on Twitter like a week or two ago, like, oh, the Jets don't need a linebacker. And even if the whole crux of that argument was, okay, well, yeah, they run a lot of nickel and stuff like that, which every team does. But I don't want Quincy Williams as one of the primary linebackers. Like, while Quincy, again, kind of the same thing with Eccles. Like, and the thing is, like, people see him make a hard hit or two a game, but then what's happening to all the other 60 reps, So, like, he was flashy, and that's why people maybe have an inflated opinion of him. But he's not a starting level guy. In a good core or even a decent core, he's a backup linebacker. Like, that's just what he is. So you need at least 2 safeties, a number 1 or at least a starting level corner, and then a linebacker at least, maybe a Jayon Brown, maybe one of those guys. I know.
Right.
I think Donnie liked him in free agency last year, but yeah, Jayon Brown's out there. I think Anthony Walker's out there.
He was my guy last year. There are a lot of good options this year, including him for linebackers.
Yeah, like a Lewican obviously has a connection with Ulbrich. Like, there's some guys out there, so I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, well, we need to grab Nakobe Dean at 10, but they need to fill some of these boxes with at least capable players. So you go into the draft and you have flexibility to pick BPA, and we can get to the whole conversation about BPA and what to pick in the draft, especially at 10, because a lot of people are receivers or want receivers.
Yep,
and
that's where we're going next.
Okay, well, there you go. Go ahead. Transition.
Well, okay. I'll watch this segue. I'll touch on real quick what you just said about the linebackers, because I am always curious. Saleh and Ulbrich are both linebackers guys. So when you have a coaching staff contrived to something like that, it's like, do they value taking linebacker high because they're all linebacker guys and they recognize the importance of it? Or because, there's so many former linebackers on this coaching staff, are they more confident in their ability to develop them? So are they more confident they could take a linebacker or, for instance, last year, take 2 safeties and convert them into linebacker? Obviously that didn't really work out too well for the Jets, but I'm curious to see if you could take Devin Lloyd or Nakobe Dean at 10, or, and I guess we'll just get into it, you could go with one of the receivers, or you could go offensive line. You mentioned Jermaine Johnson earlier, who I think if he continues to rise, I definitely think it would make sense if the Jets go, let's say they get lucky, Ekwonu falls to 4, and then they go and take a guy like Johnson at 10, depending on where his stock rises. I think Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh would be very happy with the draft that address both trenches. But if they can't, let's say for whatever reason, they want to go receiver, what is your opinion? I know you're not necessarily in love with taking a receiver at 10, to put it lightly, but out of the receivers, whether in a trade down or the Jets are going to take a weapon because they didn't do anything in free agency, so they have to take one at 10, whatever. Who do you like for the Jets in terms of schematically? Because I look at, the 2 that really jump out, obviously Garrett Wilson is one of the more refined route runners you'll see in college football. And he seems like a bona fide great scheme fit. And then you got Treylon Burks, who seems like for this offense, you can argue is maybe even more of a scheme fit, because despite he doesn't necessarily have Garrett Wilson's route running and separation, what he can do after the catch, what you could do with him in terms of your creativity, playing him at big slot, how you can play him at H-back. He can go up and get the ball. So where do you fall in these receivers? I do have one follow-up on them, and then I'm sure Michael's going to want to chime in here, because it's the flashiest position in all of football.
Yeah, and it's the easiest one to get highlights of.
Yeah.
And like with the whole linebacker thing too, like, yeah, it's like they kind of took that approach last year. I hated the Sherwood pick. Like, I'm not one of those people who loves every single pick. Like, I thought he was unathletic for even a linebacker, so I never thought that was going to work. And obviously he got injured, so we never know. And Niles Ladine was more of a really raw player, but has a lot of potential. When you get injured, you obviously can't really, continue to progress. So that didn't work out. Then on top of that, you have, Davis, who comes in and he was a complete dud. So maybe they should prioritize actually just getting good linebackers instead of maybe thinking they can develop, nobodies. Not to be, a dick, but again, 5th, 6th round pick, and, Jared Davis, who was a failure with Detroit, coming in, obviously didn't really work out. But in terms of receiver, like, to me personally, and depending on the options, which is a whole nother topic, like I would rather stack up the offense a little bit in free agency, because I don't want to go into the draft again knowing that for Zach Wilson to be comfortable, which while some of the needs, when you just look at them individually, might be bigger on defense, I'm still leaning towards offense because I want to build that offense around Zach Wilson. So I want to get a tight end in free agency, whether it be, Schultz is the number 1. Is he going to get overpaid? I think probably a little bit, or Njoku or whoever it may be. And then get a receiver, again, whether that be a Cooper, or they trade for a Cooper, or they get, Godwin if they're comfortable with the ACL, or Mari, or what's his name, Robinson, like somebody like that. Like, I want them to address that offense, so we're not kind of pigeonholed in the draft. In terms of the receivers this year, like ideally for me, one of the edge rushers falls. I want some combination of edge rusher, O-line at 1, and then the opposite at 10, because it seems like it's relatively strong. Okay, if you get an edge rusher at 4, let's say Thibodeau falls, like I think guys like Linderbaum or Green or one of those guys is going to be there. And then obviously more realistically, you get Ekwonu at 4. It seems like guys like Karlaftis, Jermaine Johnson may be there, and I'm comfortable with both of those options. And I would like to look into Lloyd and Dean a little bit more to see if they're worthy, but that's kind of where I stand right now. And especially with the receiver, again, it's the flashy thing. But my problem is like, I'll always preface by saying like I gotta really watch these guys more. But the receiver class in just this class seems like it's like no matter who you talk to, no matter who you trust, everybody has a different 1A, 1B, 1C. Yeah. So do you want to be like that first team to take 1A when maybe if you trade it down to 16, you can get that 1B, 1C, and what's going to be the separation between those players? Like if you stack up these receivers versus receiver classes in the past, at least I believe at this point, are any of them above Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Waddle, all these guys who have come out in the last couple of years, and there's even more. I'm just blanking off the top of my head, but like they would probably be wide receiver 5, 6, 7 in some of these other classes. So do you want to reach for that because you just want that receiver? And then with that being said, like another fold to this argument is, okay, well, what's the difference between a wide receiver 1, 2, 3, and then Jamar Dotson or something like that you can get in the second? Like, is it that big of a leap where you are going to pass on that edge rusher or that offensive lineman because you want that slightly better receiver? So I'd rather trade down and grab a wide receiver. And again, if no guy is separating them, if there is no, Waddle, Smith, Chase, whoever in this draft, obviously Chase was the best out of all those guys. Or sorry, Ruggs, minus what he's done. Wow. Yeah. minus what he's done. Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, those are the other guys I was forgetting. Like all those guys might be better than this wide receiver 1 in this class. So is there a guy deserving of the 10th pick? I feel probably not. Again, I'd rather get a guy in the second round. I'd rather trade down. You trade down to 17, 18, 19, and Burks is sitting there, Wilson's sitting there. Okay, I'm cool with it. But at 10, it's just a little bit too rich for my blood, especially when there's not that dominant number 1 or a guy that stands above the rest of the wide receivers is what I'm looking to say. In terms of preference, just based on what I've heard and what I've seen a little bit, London seems like that contested catch guy, and contested catch guys always concern me. Like I know he's massive, but it depends on why he's getting contested catches. Like if you're working into zone and it's a contested catch, okay, a little bit different. If you're working against man coverage and you can't separate and you're getting contested catches, a little bit more of a concern. And then in terms of Burks versus Wilson, Wilson seems like, and I'm not sure exactly the comp here, and I absolutely hate player comps, but in terms of like a really good route runner, more of a shifty type guy, like I think Elijah Moore can fill that role pretty well. So I don't think they have that Burks type player. And I hate Debo, because of course Debo is like the new sexy thing. So any guy who's big in college football who can run with the ball in his hands is going to be Debo now. But if he can fill that type of role for the Jets and be that bigger guy, where Moore could be another yak guy, but more of a route running type yak guy, because Moore's routes are ridiculous. I'd rather, like, that gives the Jets kind of like that element they don't have. I feel like Burks, where they might have a little bit of Wilson in a Elijah Moore.
I was just about to ask you that. I mean, how do you weigh what the Jets necessarily have versus what the scheme is looking for versus what Zach Wilson might need as a quarterback? Because I agree with you. I think Garrett Wilson right now is the more refined receiver than Treylon Burks. But what Burks is going to give you is something that you don't have in this offense already, where it looks like, Garrett Wilson, you could probably put him into the role that Elijah Moore is playing. They could both play the same role really well, whereas Treylon Burks is going to give you something completely different. So how do you kind of weigh those three things when you're evaluating not just receiver, but I guess receiver is the main one, but other positions as well?
Yeah, and like for this, it's kind of interesting too, because like in the Jets offense, the receivers have to be like relatively versatile. Like you guys know, like with all the tight splits, like I know like people like, oh, Elijah Moore plays too much on the outside, but when he's an outside receiver and he's like off the line of scrimmage and they're in a trip set or like a tight stack to the line of scrimmage, like slot and outside are kind of the same thing. So like I feel like people almost like say, oh, he plays outside too much because he's playing tighter to the line of scrimmage. So it's not like he's just running like vertical routes. Sometimes he does, like sometimes he's isolated on the backside, whatever. But I feel like you don't necessarily need like that one guy. Like you do need to be pretty versatile in this type of offense. But yeah, when evaluating, like I think that, and it's like sucks because Mims would have been perfect. Like Mims could have been that back shoulder contested type guy for Wilson. But unfortunately, obviously, we know what was going to happen with Mims. He's most likely going to get traded this offseason, just looking at what happened in his last season with the Jets. But
right.
Yeah, like I'm not going to look into like too much like, oh, well, Burks is the better fit because they don't necessarily have that big guy for Yak. Like Corey Davis, he's more of like a possession type receiver. He can get deep a little bit, but he's more of a possession guy. Elijah Moore is a Yak guy, but a really good route runner. Like he's all around, but he's not big. Like Traylon Burks is what, like 6'3", 6'4", right? If I'm not mistaken. So they don't have like that big Debo type guy, which is obviously something that this offense was not necessarily built on, but made that offense really take that next step in San Francisco, and especially this year, the 49ers. Like, look, Debo was probably top 5 fantasy receiver in the NFL this year, which doesn't really matter in terms of fantasy value, but just in terms about how much yardage he actually got for the offense. That's more of kind of why I'm bringing that up. But with that being said, like if I'm watching this and Garrett or Wilson is, definitely a better player. Like he's like, just, I don't really have a scale. Like he's a 9.5 and Burks is an 8.6. Like if he's almost a whole number above him, then I'm taking Wilson over Burks. But I think if I have my preference, it's Burks, but that's considering, or that's assuming that their grades are gonna be relatively similar because a lot of people have them as like 1A, 1B type, 1C receivers. But yeah, it's, in terms of like positional fit, like that, like I'm or not positional fit, like scheme fit to position. Like I'm always going to look at that. Like, and that was some of the reasons where I heard people in the draft last year, or like even for tight end, like people, get Gesicki this year. Get Evan Ingram. That makes no sense for the Jets. They need to be able to block. Same thing last year. Like, and I know Trey Smith has done well with the Chiefs, but just looking at his college, he was a guy who was a plotter, and you need to be able to move, horizontally in this running game. So did Trey Smith make sense, especially with the blood clots and all that stuff? No. So like, of course, it's gonna factor into to some extent with depending on the position group and the scheme they run. But yeah, in terms of Burks versus Wilson, obviously I would take like Burks is my preference in terms of the type of player, but he has to be a similar level of Wilson for me to take him over him.
So moving back to the defensive side of the ball, complete pivot here, but a couple of guys I want to talk about who are kind of important to the future of how they're going to construct this roster, or at least over the next few months. Sheldon Rankins and JFM. I'm curious of what you thought about them this season, because looking at Rankins, he's a guy who can be cut for, they can move on from him pretty easily. They can cut him, save $5.4 million, only $750K in dead cap. And then JFM obviously brings you that versatility. We saw him play on the inside in 2020, on the edge this year. And where they decide to play him can dictate what type of moves they make on the defensive line this year. So with those two guys, what'd you think of them this year? Would you stick with Rankins on his contract, or would you cut him? And then looking at JFM, where are you most comfortable playing him going forward?
Yeah, Rankins was disappointing to me this year. If anything, I would cut him, especially considering that JFM in his ideal role, which I believe you wrote another article on highlighting. Ideally, you get another edge rusher. JFM should be more inside than outside. Like JFM has the flexibility or the versatility to play outside. Not necessarily flexibility, is actually not all flexible for a DN, but yeah, ideally he moves inside. So where does that leave Rankins as a backup D tackle, which, considering the Jets rotate their guys like 60 to 40, which needs to stop. But you'd assume that hopefully JFM's playing 75, 80% of the reps, getting the money he is. So where does that leave Rankins? So I think you save like that $5.4 million cutting Rankins. And now the question with that position group is like, okay, well, what happens to Foley? Because Foley is kind of, square peg round hole type stuff. And are you willing to pay square peg round hole, $9 million, considering he's only going to play 50-60% of the snaps at max, considering, his main role should be run stuffing guy, not really a penetrator getting up the field, especially with JFM moving into hopefully his ideal role. So they might have an underrated need, not just a D tackle, but they need a true nose tackle on this team, a run stuffer. And I'm hoping that the Jets, just a kind of a side topic, that they're going to be a little more flexible with their scheme. Like the Patriots were, their hybrid fronts, they were famous for it. Like have some two gappers and penetrators. You don't need to make everybody a penetrator. Don't make everybody a two gapper. Mix up the roles a little bit. And they didn't do that with Foley. It's a little bit disappointing for me this season, but continue on those guys. Yeah, Rankin's disappointed for whatever reason. Got moved a lot in the run game, didn't offer as much in the pass rush as I thought he would. He definitely wasn't the Saints Rankins, so I think they saved the money with him. And then JFM, like he's good on the edge, but he could be great inside. Like, and I think you highlighted his quickness and like his lateral mobility against guards plus his power is what made him that money. It's not necessarily like on the edge you need more of that bend, more of that burst than you do inside. So he's bendy, bursty, flexible for a D tackle going against a guard. But when you're talking about going against offensive tackles who are 6'7", 6'6", can match that length and can match that athleticism, it kind of gets off put a little bit. So with that all being said, though, I still think he was a little bit disappointing this year overall, especially after he signed that contract. Like I know he got some pressure numbers and some hit numbers, but overall he disappeared for a decent amount of games. But with that being said, I don't think the Jets paid him to be a full-time edge rusher. Like I think they know in his ideal role he'll be inside. So I'm happy with him. I think Rankins is gone, and then hopefully the guys next to him step up. Obviously, hopefully Carl Lawson is healthy and he maintains the burst and the power he has coming back from the ACL, and then hopefully Q continues to take steps in the right direction too. Because I can't speak for you guys, but I can tell you year 3 of Q was disappointing to me, especially after year 2. Like year 2, you saw the games versus the Dolphins, versus the 49ers. I can't really think of any off the top of my head. Like there was games where he was absolutely crazy dominant. And I didn't really see that a lot this year. Like even a lot of his sacks, he had like 6 or 7 sacks. At least 3 or 4 of those had to be off like stunts where he was pretty much put there by the scheme, not his own doing. So disappointed with him, a little bit disappointed with JFM. I think they need to take big steps in the right direction, especially considering they've invested, not necessarily Douglas, but number 3 pick in Q, $14 million, $13 million, whatever it is for JFM, a lot of money in loss, and he needs to be healthy. And then we'll see what happens. And hopefully they add the number 4 pick and number 10 pick to that group. So
you brought up Quinnen. He was actually going to be my next question, but you pretty much hit it. I do feel like I agree with you. I feel like it was a disappointing season in the sense that he didn't build on 2020, and ultimately it did kind of prove to be a step back. I think at the start of the season he was kind of keeping pace, but then the latter half of the year he did get fairly quiet compared to what he was in 2020. He was still good, but by his standards, what we expect from him, definitely wasn't able to build on 2020 and become that top 3, top 5 type of player. And ultimately just, good, which is not, it doesn't make him a bust or anything close to that, but it's still not what he's capable of. And it was refreshing to hear him kind of address it perfectly at the end of the season. He did say that, there are some games where he feels like he's dominant. There are other games where he feels like he's just executing his role. And that pretty much is what happened. So I'm definitely expecting more from him going forward. But another one of the big names on defense who I felt like wasn't playing up to his talent level, but also wasn't terrible, is CJ Mosley. So what did you think of his 2021 season? Where did he fall in that spectrum between, because there were some games where it really felt like he was taking over and making a lot of big plays and executing his assignments perfectly. Then there were other games where he would miss way too many tackles for what I think you would expect from him based on what we've seen in the past. So what did you think of Mosley's 2021 season overall?
Yeah. And just to touch up on Q too, like, good is fine, but you need to be great for being the 3rd overall pick.
Right. Yeah, I can't pay that.
Yeah, especially for a guy like I'm a massive Q defender. Like his technique in college was absurd. Like I was one of those guys, and again, I'm okay to admit it. Like I was saying that he was better than Nick Bosa. Now, not necessarily that I would take him over Bosa because of the importance. Obviously, I'm going to value DN more than D tackle.
Right.
But with that being said, like I loved him coming out of college. Year 1, good. Year 2, I thought he was on that track to be, a top 5 D tackle in the league this year. And he was not that. If anything, like you said, I think he took a step back. Like I didn't see as many dominant performances as I did 2021 versus 2020. So he needs to take steps in the direction, because right now, if you're telling me like, oh, sign Q, he wants an extension for $21 million, $20 million a year, I can't do that right now. I can't. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. And especially coming off of like that year he had last year. And then you hear all this stuff, you see the one jet drive, which is also like obviously the ultimate hype machine. But just like ultimately, like, okay, he's going to be one gapping more. Q should be more successful in a one gapping type role. And he took a step back. So it was all built up for him to have a massive year, and he took a step back. So it's disappointing. Mosley, Well, one, obviously he missed 2 years of football. Like he's going to take some time to adjust. And I think that he didn't like, maybe I'm just bailing him out. And like, I would have to, cause like, Nania and especially like with me, like I'll record like 60 to 80 plays some games. And like, you'll watch the team, but you cannot watch every single player, every single rep, because you'd be there for 4 days. And then by the time I put out the film review, it would be Sunday at 12:55. The game would start at 1 and nobody would give a crap about it anymore. So like I missed some of what I would watch if I obviously watched him just individually on every single play. But to me, I think he was really the only guy in that secondary on the linebacking group who was like consistent. I think he had a large burden on his shoulders. Like, he missed a couple of tackles. He also missed like two games, and he said like 100 and didn't he like set the record or was close to the record for Jets in a single season for tackles. Like he had a massive weight on his shoulders, carrying this linebacking group, carrying the safeties. And there were times, and I'll let to go back and watch, but there was times where I noticed him being a little bit hesitant to shoot gaps because he didn't trust his backside. Like there was a play I specifically remember, the play, I don't remember exactly who he was playing, but like it was a duo run. You're getting a lot of double teams on the front side. That can happen in inside zone. So some people just see double teams on the front side of an inside zone and say, oh, that's duo. It's not necessarily the case. But nonetheless, it was a duo play. There was a combo block between, I think it was a guard and a center. And you see him seeing the running back, on his track going through, let's just say the B gap, but he looks like he also checks backside and sees there's nobody there for the cutback. And then he kind of hesitates. And the running back ends up, don't be a child, but it's called banging the hole, which is the primary hole you're supposed to run through. But because CJ Mosley hesitated, he let the combo block climb to him. And he wasn't in position to make the tackle. So it almost seemed like he was hesitant because he was trying to cover for multiple guys. And that's not necessarily the case the whole year. Like, I don't think he was necessarily the CJ Mosley of the Ravens when we signed him, but I still think he was like a very solid linebacker who, if he has a better linebackers around him, if he has a better defensive front that actually produces, if he has better safeties around him, if he has better coverage around him, I think he will show out more than he did this year. But I think he was almost like the only man in the middle of that defense. And sometimes the weight on his shoulders just got like too much to bear.
Yeah, there's definitely a hole there. And I am curious to see if they would go with, do they go back to their route of taking a guy in the third round, a developmental guy, and sticking a young guy next to CJ Mosley, or do you go and try to, pay somebody like a Devondre Campbell or a Lua Khan or Jalen Brown, any of those guys we talked about? All right, there's two more topics we definitely need to hit. And then, I'm sure, I don't know if there's anything else that'll come out, and then we'll get out of here. But I guess we'll start with, Zach Wilson, and then I wanted to talk about, LaFleur Ulbrich. So I guess it's kind of three things. Let's close with Zach Wilson, because I think that's the money. That's the pay-per-view. That's the main event. Everybody wants to hear your thoughts on Zach Wilson. But when you look at Ulbrich and LaFleur, obviously you touched a little bit on Ulbrich. One of the interesting things I heard on your podcast a few weeks ago that I completely agree with is their substitution and their rotation. Like, it's great if you want to have a rotation or a defensive line, but they would just sub out whole units at a time and put in, 4 backups in. And I said this to Michael, it'd be like, if you're playing 2K, you don't just immediately put the bench lineup in. If your buddy you're playing still has the starters in, like you can't have LeBron against, the ninth man on the bench. And it kind of felt like the Jets would do that. And in some weird spots too, it could be a really crucial 2nd and 3. And then all of a sudden you look at who's out there, and it's, Nathan Shepard and Shaq Lawson. And, part of that was due to injuries, but their rotation was odd. Starting with Ulbrich and then LaFleur, what were your thoughts on the rookie coordinators and how they did and how they evolved over the year? And do you see the foundations of a good scheme for the Jets?
Yeah, I think the scheme is fine. Like, when you don't have players to execute it, it's never necessarily going to work out. Now, is that an excuse for them being the 32nd ranked defense and like giving up the most points and yards in Jets history or somewhere near it? No, it's not an excuse. And like you said, you don't sim out the entire lineup in basketball. Unless you're 6 years old and it's like auto subs or something like that. Like that
or unless you're Tom Thibodeau with the Knicks. I think all Knicks fans can agree with that.
It just doesn't happen. Like, the Nets are, that game last night against the Kings absolutely pissed me off. But in general, you don't take Harden, Kyrie, and Durant out at the same time. You leave one or two of those guys, in. So it made no sense. And I wonder if that's like an overall coaching philosophy thing, because we kind of saw that with receivers sometimes too. Like, I remember pointing out, they would be in the red zone. It would be like Braxton Berrios, Jeff Smith, and whoever else. I'm Elijah Moore is not in. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I don't know if there's an overall coaching thing, and like even with the rotation, like I'm okay with the rotation, but to what extent? Like obviously, if your backup is a really, really good player too, and really explosive, and you're trying to penetrate on a stunt or something like that, okay, I get it. Like put him in for a couple plays, but like you said, like to sub out, JFM, Rankins, Q, and Foley, and then you see, like you said, Shaq Lawson, Tim Ward, Bryce Huff, and somebody else running out. Like, what is going on here? And it's like for multiple plays in a row, and then like shocker, those are the plays where they would get absolutely gashed. So they need to fix that 100%. They need to stop being so kind of like stringent on their philosophies. Like I said, like Foley is a 2-gapper. Let's make them 2-gap. Let's figure out the scheme where you could penetrate C, B gaps. And then Foley, hey, this is your job. You're 330. Take the A gap. Like they need to figure that out a little bit and stop being so strict. Same thing with Bryce Hall. Like why was Bryce Hall not moving? In the beginning of the year, I know, like towards the middle of the season, they started to move him around a little bit. Like, oh my God, holy crap! And they moved them. Like, but why did it take them so long to figure it out? And I know there was some sort of quote. Don't quote me on it, but it's basically the Jets in some form or fashion saying, like, we were trying to stay like strict to our scheme because we want the guys to learn it. And if that's a part of it, like you want the young guys to learn like the exact system you want, fine. But it's not like, with that being said, will they adjust? Like, I'm hoping they say that and they recognize that they could have adjusted, but it's like, okay, just, hey, throw them to the wolves and let's figure out what they got. And we know we're gonna have some growing pains. Okay. That excuses a little bit, but there still leaves a question in the back of your mind. Like, do they know how to be less strict to adjust to certain things? And like certain things with the defense, like, yeah, again, they're 32, but like there was everybody saying, oh, why are they running man on third down? Why are they running man on third down? Why are they running man on third down? If the players execute, they execute, if the Falcons game, they ran a lot of zone on third down to my knowledge, and they got absolutely burned because their guys weren't knowledgeable about the zones they're supposed to stay in, or pass off 1 to 2 or 2 to 1 or 2 to 3 or push, whatever. They didn't know how to do that. Same thing with like the call versus the Texans. Like, I don't know exactly what the situation was, but I think it was like 4th and goal or 3rd and goal from like the 15-yard line, whatever. And they called a really soft zone and only blitzed 3 or 4 guys. And the end result is Pinnock drops to the goal line, and there's a completion right in front of him at the 5-yard line. Pinnock completely misses the tackle. He runs in for a touchdown. Oh my God, why'd you run zone? Okay. But then if he ran man and he got burned, dude, why didn't you run zone and play soft? So like you're never going to win depending on the result. So people are result hunting. They're not really process hunting with defense. So I thought the defense overall, like the schematics were fine, but the personnel stuff, some of it I had a little bit of a question with, but I don't think it was anything overall like concerning that they were doing. Like I think they had a good mixture of 3 and 6 and some like we get like the 5s and 7s. Like there's some evidence of that, which are just like most times like 7's more like a version of a 4, but or quarters. But they showed enough versatility where it wasn't like so like strict to one thing in terms of their calls where I'm worried about it. So there's some adjustments that need to be made, but with better talent, without injuries. Like again, it's never going to be an excuse for being as bad as they were at times, but you're already a team that's supposed to be pretty bad, and then you lose Carl Lawson, you lose Vinny Curry, you lose this guy, that guy, that guy. That it's not going to work out. Like you're playing red wine, a guy who's like just off the street in week 1 of the season. Did
that have to be week 1 against Darnold and Robbie, where red wine, of course, was on the field? Like, because without that horrible botch, they don't have that touchdown over the Jets, which really bothers me.
Yeah, Nani and I were there. We didn't sit together, but that was brutal to see. Darnold to Robbie.
It was awful, absolutely awful.
And then he did the Jet celebration, which we haven't seen since Santonio.
Which then they blow the rest of the season. Darnold sucks, and Rob Anderson's questioned about how good he actually is. So karma's a bitch. So yes. it is what it is. And again, for all those like Darnold people out there, like that really worked out well. Right? Like he really killed it with the Panthers. Now they're looking to move on after 1 year. So thank you, Joe Douglas, for fleecing the Panthers for that, because he was terrible. But yeah, that's kind of where I stand on the defense overall. With
Yeah, I think one of the things that you have to be bullish on about Saleh is his evolution of the defense every year in San Francisco. Like he always seemed to recognize some of the potential weaknesses, and he made adjustments to it. You certainly saw that when they brought in Kucerek as the defensive line coach and went wide 9 in 2019, and then in 2020 they played a lot more man defense than they had been, and not just a strict vanilla zone defense. So I think you like that, but like you said, he didn't really. We talked a lot about in the hiring process wanting somebody who was going to build their scheme around the talent, and that certainly was not the case on the defensive side of the ball, which, like you said, could be a good thing if you're trying to instill a system for young players. But if they're this bad, I mean, they're not going to be as bad as they were last year, but if they're still horrible on defense, you really have to hope that Saul is willing to move on from Ulbrich or at least take a bigger role on the defensive side of the ball. Cause I still have some concerns there. I definitely, but in today's NFL, it's a lot different. What do you think about LaFleur on the offensive side of the ball? Certainly got a lot better as after the first few weeks, which was pretty rough.
Yeah, there were some things that were like, concerning the numbers and like in the beginning of the year, and we're all going crazy. Then obviously Booth LaFleur happened. I forget which week that
Cincinnati
was.
7.
Which I'd have to like really go back and watch it all to just like how much of it really changed. I thought he started getting a little bit more creative when that happened. But like, listen, like the thing is, and it was one of my concerns, and I know Nania did plenty of like live streams with me in the offseason and stuff. It's like at a certain point, Zach Wilson's surrounded by like too much youth, and then you compile that with the fact that he only has like Mike White behind him, like so you have a rookie head coach, rookie OC, rookie quarterback with a quarterback behind him who's never seen a regular or NFL regular season snaps. Like it was a concern, and we had all of us like in the moment when they hired LaFleur knew they were going to hit some bumps in the road, especially early with a rookie OC. And those bumps happened and people freaked out, so I don't like, I think he was fine. You like the creativity, you like the pick routes, you like all the end arounds into a throwback, into a throw, you had like the Philly special in the one game. Like he was plenty creative. And I think the offense produced a decent amount with, obviously some underwhelming quarterbacks. Like to start the year, obviously Wilson was pretty bad. You had Flacco. I don't know exactly what I forget exactly what he did when he came in. It wasn't anything great, but at least they produced some. Mike White had the Bengals game, obviously probably the most exciting game of the year, depending on how you feel about the Titans game, which I was there for the Titans game, so I probably put that number one. But yeah, I thought it was fine. He runs a ton of levels type concepts. Zach Wilson's, we'll talk about him in a little bit, but he started hitting some stuff later. There's some definitely like staples. He loves the sail, the flood type concepts. He loves like the spin concepts, which is basically just like levels with an option route underneath with the dig over the top. There's some wrinkles that I like with the sail on the play action or the naked bootlegs outside. He has the fourth option sitting down kind of in the soft spot of like a hook zone, where if the sail is covered up, because sail is ran everywhere, he has another kind of like stop route check down over that middle as the fourth option. Like there's some wrinkles that he threw in there that I really liked. And then you saw him, which I don't know when the last time this happened for the Jets, but right after they threw that pass to Crowder, and then it turned into like that lateral or whatever to Barrios or vice versa, whatever that was. You saw teams like the week after try to copy that. I think it was the Cowboys like the very next week who tried to copy it and didn't run it as well. So like he was innovative. I thought he was good overall with his play calling. Nothing stands out that he was bad. And I thought the offense produced at a relatively high rate. Like they finished at the end of the year, they were like somewhere around like 18th the last couple of weeks. And I think you add, an Icky, you add a number one, like true dominant wide receiver, you add 2 tight ends. Then this offense could be, closing on hopefully the top 10 if Zach Wilson continues his progression. And I think like overall, like, you have LaFleur, who's like built on that, that Shanahan type system, like heavy 12 personnel, all that stuff. And Joe Douglas, who overall I defend a lot, but you go into the season with Tyler Kroft and Griffin as your number 1 and 2 tight ends and a 12 heavy personnel system for a rookie OC who's going to rely heavily on what he kind of built his like resume on, which is 12 personnel. So he didn't get out of it and we got mad, but again, he's a rookie. Like it's going to take him some time to adjust, and you don't surround him with what he needs, both him and Zach Wilson. So it struggled. And then he adjusted a little bit, which is a positive. I thought for the rest of the year, it was a solid offense considering what they had.
So kind of wrapping it up with the coaching, I want to talk a little bit about Robert Saleh, because he's really interesting to try to evaluate right now, because at least for me personally, when I look at him and just the things that he can control, regardless of the win-loss, regardless of the point differential, how many times they got blown out, any of that. Just looking at him, how he carries himself, the vision that he has, the moves that he makes, it really feels like it's hard, at least up to this point, that it's hard for him to have done much better than what he's done. Like, it's hard for me to find problems with anything that he's done so far. And I really feel optimistic that he is going to be the guy for this team long term. And I mean, I guess the main questions are obviously player development. Can they actually, they're committed to the youth, but can they actually make it work, make these guys turn into good players? The scheme adaptability over the years. If it doesn't work out, can you adapt it, change it to make it work, mold it to the talent, things like that. But at least up to this point, I really feel like he has a good, strong, long-term vision that he's committed to. I feel like the culture has been good. The camaraderie in the locker room, the way guys talk about him.
Yeah.
It really feels like he's done a great job within what he could control so far. So what are your thoughts on what we've seen from Saleh so far? And what would your concerns be in terms of within what he can control, regardless of, because we know they got to get more talented, obviously. And that's where most of the wins come from, just having talent. But within what he can control, what he's done so far, what do you like about what he's done to this point? And are there any areas where you think he can improve going forward?
Yeah, it's like almost like information overload. Like even that question, I wish I could have took it in like 5 different segments and answered them each individually. Cause like now I'm trying to stack up answers in my head. And like with the season, like there was definitely some games where like individually I would have had a problem with some coaching decision or not challenging this or not doing that. But like overall, there wasn't anything that was like consistent over a 17 game stretch where it was really a concern for me in terms of like him on the field or coaching or whatever you said. Which obviously it was really Ulbrich calling the plays. And like Ben said, like, okay, if Ulbrich's struggling next season and the Jets are legitimately competing and Saleh just sitting on the sideline and not adjusting, then it'll be a concern. But like how, again, we're not in that room. And if they are legitimately thinking like, hey, we're going to let them kind of, throw shit into the fan and see what kind of sticks, or shit to the wall and see what fits, not into the fan, because it's not very going to stick, but to the wall, that's the correct analogy. Then I get it. Like, so it's somewhat defensible in terms of him not stepping in. But if that happens when we're competing, it's going to be a completely different story. If they're not, having Foley two gap, if he's still here, or having Bryce Hall travel or call a different type of defense for, whatever, like that stuff I'll start to question. But nothing was glaringly bad. And in terms of the good stuff, like he just feels like an adult in the room, which doesn't feel like we've had in quite a bit. Like it's like he's that CEO guy. Like, when's the last time have we heard Jets players like unscripted in the media coming out and talking about how much they love it here, how much they love Saleh, how respected he is? Like, yeah, when they were winning, but when they were losing is a little bit different, So like, I think Saleh's the adult we need now. Obviously, you need the correct DC around him, so hopefully it works out for Ulbrich with better talent around him, with that youth learning the system, and it can become more efficient. But yeah, there's nothing that kind of turned me off about Saleh this year. And like you'll have the people who are like, on Twitter, like, oh my God, it's 42-10. Why is he showing more emotion on the sideline? Like, what do you want him to do? Like, do you want him to be grabbing full grown men and spitting in their face and slapping them? Like, what is he supposed to do? You're losing 40, you're losing 42-10. Like if you go to and yell, like people think it's like high school or college. There's a different level, and there's certain reasons why certain coaches don't work in the NFL. Cough, what the hell's his name? Urban in Jacksonville. Yeah. Like when you're in college, you have that authority over these guys. If you do that shit in the NFL, you're gonna lose your respect of the players, and that stuff travel or spreads like wildfire around NFL circles. So you can't be doing that stuff, yelling at guys, screaming at guys, all this stuff. I get rah-rah to it a certain extent, and we saw that typically when they were winning and they made a good play, which you like to see. But like the whole like, oh, they're losing, get in their faces type thing was I think that was way overblown. And I think he's he's relatively like calm in the eye of the storm, which I was actually a little bit surprised about. Like he didn't freak out as much as I thought he would. And it's like crazy. Like people, no matter what side it's on, just like that zone versus man call against the Falcons. I believe I brought up like with him. Okay. Either he's yelling and it's, oh my God, this guy is immature, or he's quiet and it's, oh my God, he's too quiet. Like nobody questioned quietness, and Bill Belichick was winning all those Super Bowls. Like, so like, who cares about what they were like on the sideline? That's such a crazy thing that people are talking on Twitter, but I don't get involved in Twitter fights anymore. It just wastes way too much of my time that I do not have. Typically, unless I have a couple of brews, which then it's a different story. that is what it is.
Pride's on the line.
Yeah. That I remember that I had like a whole like 3-hour event set or session when Knicks fans were getting on me about the Nets losing.
That
was classic. That was great.
Yeah. That was one of my weaker moments. And even I think I had a couple of weeks ago, and I went back to her like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna delete a couple of those. That happens sometimes. But other than that, I don't play on Twitter. So yeah, nothing bad. It was more good. Like I thought he showed who he was supposed to be, which is like the first CEO coach we've ever had. You know, we had Rex on the defense, we had Gase on the offense, we had Bowles on the defense, and it didn't really work. We want that guy to lead the organization, and that's what I want most out of the head coach, a guy who could lead everybody, and he seemed to fit that bill in year one. So I was definitely happy with him. I'm happy that the direction he's going with the Jets. So.
All right. Well, Michael was still in Senior Bowl week, and he was trying to overload you with the to test your mental processing on Robert Saleh. But I'm going to give you the Zach Wilson question, very simply. What are your thoughts?
Zach Wilson.
That just you can take it wherever you want. I mean, I can go more specific if you'd like. I guess, how did he line up from what you saw on film in college to what we got in year one?
But I know Nania has an answer, like a kind of a inkling of the answer I'm going to give, because like towards the middle of the year, like after that Saints game, we specifically went on a live stream, and we were saying how concerned we were. Say up to the Saints game, he was playing worse than Sanchez. He was playing worse than Geno. He was playing worse than Darnold. Like he didn't have that Darnold rookie year where he had the Colts game, the Bengals game,
right,
the Lions game after the first pick. Like he didn't have really any of those performances. Like even the Titans game, which everybody hypes up, I bring up all the time. He had a couple of flashy plays, but kind of like Aaron Rodgers said, like you need to make like 5 of those a game and you'll have a great game. And he had, the throw to Corey Davis. He had the throw to Cole. But then there were some plays, like he could have closed out that game multiple times. He missed Corey Davis on that out route or speed out on like 3rd and 10, whatever it was, towards the late end in the fourth quarter. Missed that throw. He missed Ryan Griffin in the red zone for a walk-off touchdown. The one play that people hyped up, like he I think it was a Yankee concept. Long story, you're just gonna have a post and then a deep over from the opposite side, and you're gonna read post to over. And he rolls out to the right. I don't know if there's some pressure, and he stares on Corey Davis the entire time, and he gets double covered. And Keelan Cole is running wide open, like 25, like an easy completion for 25 yards. And Zach Wilson just chucks a bomb to Corey Davis, which he's double covered. He thankfully gets a pass interference call, but the process of that play was, really bad, where he had a wide open guy for 25 yard gain. The result is, okay, yeah, he got a penalty, but the process was terrible how he got there. So there was a lot of that in the Titans game where people think it was a great game. It really wasn't. Like he had a couple flashy plays, but it was not a great game. Overall. And so the entire 70% of the start of his season was really, really bad. Like he was just missing passes that I've never seen him miss before in college. At college, he hit those tight windows. I don't care if it's against the air quotes guys who are going to be janitors in a couple of years. I don't care. He fit it in there. He had great anticipation. He had great accuracy, but it just wasn't showing up in the beginning of the year. He was definitely uncomfortable in the pocket. He was definitely starting to overthink his mechanics and trying to point that ball and aim that ball instead of just letting his natural ability take over, which his base is never going to be. I severely doubt his base is ever going to be really consistent. Like he has that problem where he kind of overstrides, he locks out his front leg, and he doesn't really drive through his back foot into the throw and kind of step through it. He tends to kind of have an inner rotation on the back plant foot, which kind of then locks out the front foot and makes it more unbalanced. And you're not really allowing your weight, your whip-like motion, your waist to fully come through. So he kind of cuts it off. But if you're going to naturally throw kind of with bad mechanics, then throw with bad mechanics. Like obviously you want it fixed, but look at Phillip Rivers, look at there's plenty of quarterbacks who don't have great mechanics, even Mahomes at times. But if it's going to be fine 9 out of 10 times, then it is fine 9 out of 10 times. It is what it is. You're going to miss that one throw. And he just started to think about it way, way too much. And then we saw one of the biggest problems kind of come to fruition. Like he didn't face a ton of pressure in college. And I thought that was a little bit overstated, but he faced some pressure, and I thought generally he handled it okay. But one of the problems was he tended to bail out of the pocket way too early. Like he was not comfortable stepping up in the pocket and delivering balls. You'd see like that, like Russell Wilson, like reverse pivot, scrambling out, not stepping up, instead of escaping, instead of stepping up in the pocket, escaping the pocket completely. And we saw that when he was facing pressure. And that's like, at first, like we were concerned in terms of like, oh, well, you had the whole Carr situation with the Texans years ago. His first game with a guy who wasn't used to facing a lot of pressure in college was the Panthers just destroying him every single play. There was even a game later in the year where he faced like kind of a similar situation. Like there was a game where he was hit 22 times on 20 dropbacks, something like that. Was that the Bills game? It was the Bills game.
Bills game, yeah.
I think it was the Bills game.
I think it was 19 dropbacks, and he got hit 21 times. Like the one time he got hit off on a handoff. It's like, so I think that kind of got to him at points, even though the offensive line did get better towards the end of the year. But with that being said, like, so you saw the pressure start to get to him. You saw him start to think about his mechanics, and there were some games where his accuracy was laughable. But towards the end of the year, he definitely got more confident, and he had really, really good games towards the end of the year. So I was really down on him, and that was super negative for about 3 minutes. But the end of the year was very, very, very positive for me. Like his mental processing got quicker. He started reading defenses quicker. He started looking guys off. His accuracy got better. And his overall just quarterbacking process got a lot more smooth. Even that the Dolphins game was a start of it, probably, off the top of my head. Or the Eagles game was good, but they had the Saints game. But then after that was the Dolphins, I believe. Then even after that, it was the Jaguars game. And like, of course, like I always say, like people like stat hump. It's just something I always say. So like you have people who watch the broadcast, don't really remember what they're watching because they're 12 millers deep. And then they type in, oh, well, the stats, what were the stats? And he had 98 passing yards, like 100 rushing yards or whatever it was. So you're like, oh dude, he threw for like 100 yards. Like who cares? But his mental processing in that game was so clean. That I was, and there was a mistake or two, but overall very, very clean, where I was very, very encouraged with that game. And then that was followed up by the Bucks, if I'm not mistaken. And that game was also really, really, really good. Like he had some throws in there with pressure in his face where he's fitting balls into windows that are absurd. Like that throw to Barrios where he's falling down, ridiculous. Some of the throws over the middle, ridiculous. Like you could not walk a ball into a better spot. So the accuracy got better. His decisiveness got better. His footwork got a little bit better. Some people overstated just because balls got to where they're supposed to go. People automatically say the footwork got better, which it really didn't overall. He just got more consistent and kind of stopped pointing the ball and got more confident. So the start of the year was brutal. The end of the year, though, some of those games, I was more impressed than any other games I've seen from other people. Like, yeah, like you had a couple of those flashy plays. Again, like I would have to like completely rewatch Darnold versus Texans and the Packers his rookie year. But if you seem like more of those plays were like out of structure, out of pocket plays that you can't really rely on, where Zach was killing guys in structure, which is huge. So very down, but very, very up towards the end. So I'm kind of like back to baseline level when they drafted him. Like he kind of had more of an up and down year than I thought he would, but he kind of ended in a similar spot where I'm still pretty encouraged going into his year two.
When you look back at the season, I think a lot of Jets fans are left with a positive taste in their mouth about how it ended. It wasn't to the same extent of how Darnold ended in 2018, but I think like what you said with particularly the Bucs game, but the Jags game, absolutely. And even the Eagles game, you have to be really excited about the quarterback that you saw. I do feel like the overall NFL narrative was that he had a bad rookie season, which you could probably say. I mean, Allen is the one guy who had a similar rookie season who really took off. So there has to be some concerns. But when you think positively about Zach Wilson, obviously you like the development, but specifically in his game, what was something that he was doing really well right off the jump, or maybe that he got a lot better with throughout the season, that a notable positive trait of his that you really noticed when watching his film?
Yeah, and like I said, at the beginning of the year, he didn't really do anything well. Like,
okay. Next question.
To be like frank, like it was really bad. Like you had a couple of flash plays, but like cool. Like I'm sure, like I don't want to say his name in my mouth. Like so did Jamarcus Russell. Right.
I'm sure
that happened.
How much of it do you think was like momentum? I mean, it felt obviously there was a skill and there's a skill gap, but it just seems like he never really got to get going, especially early in games and early in the season. Like he had the 4 out of his first 10 passes against New England are interceptions, and against Carolina he's getting sacked, and there'd be like a key Davis drop that would kill a drive. I mean, it just feels like they just couldn't get anything going until Tennessee. And is that like coaching, or was he really just playing that poorly?
He was playing that poorly. Like he was. And like, again, it's not like he was surrounded. Obviously, you have Corey Davis drops, you have the offensive line miscommunications, you don't have talent, you have a rookie OC. So like he wasn't put in a situation like he struggled, but it's not like he was Mac Jones. Like it's not like he was put in New England with Bill Belichick and McDaniels. Right. So obviously the situation, you have a rookie quarterback who's struggling, compiled on top of the fact that the offensive coordinator and the offense of personnel is all struggling together. So it makes it look worse. But he was really bad at the beginning of the year. And then the stuff he improved on is like I said, like his footwork didn't get better, but he's got more confident in his footwork because like, listen, like you're not always going to have picture perfect footwork. And like, do I want him to see him improve on it? Yeah, sure. Like Allen had some bad footwork coming out of Wyoming. Right. But he fixed some of it. Like he worked with a quarterback coach, and typically you don't see it fixed like completely because it's easy to practice something in a gym on a field when there's no pressure. But then when you have, 270-pound TJ Watt, whatever he's actually probably let it down, 250 TJ Watt breathing down your neck, you kind of go back to what you know, but you have to train at it like maliciously or like, I think that's the right word, to really fix that. And Josh Allen apparently did that. And one of his biggest problems is like overstriding, and then he fixed that. So, because, overstriding lead to not being on balance, the release is a little bit slower, and he truly fixed that. And you saw Josh Allen's really bad accuracy in his rookie year, and then it fixed. And hopefully Zach Wilson can fix it, but he was just not confident in the footwork he had, which was never like, it's not great, but it got him where he needed to go at BYU, which again, he was fitting into the tight windows. He was leading guy with perfect precision. He had pinpoint accuracy. And in the beginning of the year, it was hard to ask Zach Wilson at certain times to put a ball in a catchable spot. Like you had balls bouncing 5 yards short of guys on like a 5-yard route, so like it was bad, but he got more confident in himself. Again, I thought he got more confident in the offense. He went through reads quicker, in early in the year, he would lock onto guys. And at the end of the year, he was much quicker to go to 1 to 2 to 3 to trust his eyes. Beginning of the year, he would see a guy open, but really have to confirm it. But he's more comfortable in reading NFL defenses, kind of knowing where guys are supposed to be with his offense, where he didn't take that extra second or two, because you look at a guy for a second or two in the NFL, the window's closed. So he had a definitely better understanding of where his guys were supposed to be, the understanding of the offense, and just confidence in what he was seeing, where at the beginning of the year, he did not have that. And then obviously like the thing we saw all year was his ability to throw at altered arm angles, to throw it on with altered bases. His arm strength is, we could talk about, Herbert and Jackson and Mahomes and Josh Allen and all those guys and really stack it up one by one. But I think he's in that top 7 to top 8 or 8 range, and just in terms of pure arm talent, in terms of the velocity he can put on the ball, just the length of the field he could throw the ball, the altered arm angles he could throw at, yeah, sure. A guy like Peyton, and again, I'm not comparing him to Peyton Manning, but Peyton Manning can throw a ball maybe 70 yards in his prime, but could he do it falling off of his back foot, from the left going across the field? Probably not, but Zach Wilson can do that stuff. So he has a freaky arm. And again, he got more confident in everything around his game and the offense. And that's why at the end of the year, it just seemed so much better for him. So he needs to continue on that, get the offense down, get some better playmakers around him. And then, like Roger said, like those 4 or 5 times a game where you are put in a situation where you have to use that crazy arm talent or that crazy arm angle, then use it, but be confident enough in yourself in the pocket and in the structure of the offense, where those other, 25, 30 times you drop back in the game, you can execute the offense without having to look to bail out of the pocket and throw a 50, 60-yard pass. And towards the end of the year, that was somebody else's, like other people's complaints. It was like, oh, he's not really having those magical plays, but that's fine. That's there. Like he was operating the offense. Even if it was some short stuff, that's fine. That's what he needs to improve on. He's always going to have an arm that could throw the ball 60 yards on a rope. Like that's just who Zach Wilson is. So, yeah, I think that answers your question.
No, absolutely. The thing with Zach that I'm really excited about, outside of Trey Lance, I think he's the only guy that doesn't have to switch offensive coordinators. And I just think that's always big. I mean, Darnold is going to be on another offensive coordinator. And you just see how that can affect a young quarterback, like just never really being able to get in the same system and know the offense like the back of your hand, and then focus on being an NFL quarterback and establishing chemistry with your receiver, whatever. So I think that's going to be big for him. And I think he's just, as he gets more comfortable, he'll try less to be Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes or whatever, and just try to be himself. And I think you're going to see a blend of Mahomes and Rodgers and Russell Wilson and all sorts of things. But I think there are times where, like, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm not saying that Zach Wilson needs to be a Lamar Jackson or, rush first type of quarterback, but it felt like early on in the season, especially, he left a lot of rushing yards on the field. I mean, even that Saints game where he had the big run, it's like, I feel like he could have gotten another 20 yards and, he had the knee injury, whatever. But there were times where it kind of felt like, okay, he's trying to be Aaron Rodgers instead of just, taking the 10 yards here. Even on throws, it would be like, okay, here's Elijah Moore coming, on a drag. These 3 yards, you might pick up 7 or 8, but you're going to try to hit Corey Davis on the out route, 20 yards down the field, whatever it is. There were kind of a lot of moments like that where he got too aggressive or ahead of his skis. And I just think that you're going to see a lot of those things improve. I feel like we've touched on it all. I think we touched on the draft, we touched on the defense, and obviously Zach Wilson. Michael, is there anything else you wanted to bring up to Joe before we get out of here? I always appreciate hearing Mr. Blewett's takes because they're always informed and they're always original. A lot of people have takes that are based off of other people's opinions. You don't have to worry about that with Joe Blewett.
Well, I guess the only thing left would be to talk about kickers. I mean, Eddie Pinheiro. I think he's got amazing technique. I like his plant leg has got a great angle to the ground. I think it allows him to generate good torque in his hips. He doesn't have a lot of power, but I think his accuracy is precise. There's consistency in his form.
But still running.
Anything to add to my Pinheiro scouting report?
My question with that, like follow-up question to that, wasn't there a kicker like a couple of years ago who either started or ended really hot and he just completely fell off a cliff? Was that was that Catanzaro? Or
Catanzaro retired.
Catanzaro didn't he have a decent 2017 season?
Yeah, he did, but then did we get rid of him and then he retired? And
or was Ficken okay at the end of that 1 year? Or
maybe it was Ficken. We had a kicker in the last couple of years who
Jason Myers
ended or started really hot and then sucked the rest of the time. Oh. So I would be a little bit cautious with Pinheiro. And with that being said, because it's the end of this last question, I'll bring up my conspiracy theory, which is that Joe Douglas isn't that stupid to not ever bring in a kicker. And the reason that he has these really shitty kickers is they're not really trying to compete right now. And if the kicker is going to lose them a game 2 or maybe even 3 because they're so bad, that's like the most controversial kind of position that he did, or the least controversial position he'll get like feedback from the fans. Like, okay, the kicker sucks. It is what it is. Like, exactly. But if he ignores a quarterback or a receiver or tight end, like he'll get a bunch of crap for it. But kicker will kind of get like pushed to the wayside and nobody will ever really think about it in a couple of years. So he is purposely trying to lose games while we're not good. When we're actually good, he'll actually get a real kicker. So that's what I think.
Okay. I could buy into that conspiracy theory.
That's fair. As long as he finally, goes forward this offseason, then I can buy into it. If not, then maybe we just have a Douglas is an anti-kicker sort of GM problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joe, as I said, I always enjoy talking to you. I'm glad Michael even snuck in some kicker talk. The podcast opened with some kicker talk, talking Chris Blewett, and then it closed with some kicker talk. And I think that's suitable for this podcast. I'm sure listeners have seen your stuff, but if they haven't, just let them know where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, if you guys haven't heard about this site called Jets X Factor, I don't know if you guys are familiar.
It's only been plugged 80 times every pod.
You can find me there. That's me, Mike, and Robbie are the owners of that. So we'll be around there for years and years and years. I know I bounced around to a couple websites, but I plan on being there for quite a few years. Joe RB31 on Twitter. I don't post as much film as I used to there because again, I have a subscription website that I need to give some people some content to sub for. Joe RB31. I already said that. Go to YouTube for the live streams. The live streams I'll bring up some film and talk about this stuff. And like you said, Ben, it's all film, learning about these players, like legitimately learning about them, not just watching 5-minute highlight tapes or getting a blue check mark on Twitter with 50,000 followers and making his takes my own. Like everything that I come up with is original because I think it's bullshit otherwise, to be completely honest. So follow me for original takes and film stuff.
I love it. I completely agree with everything you said there. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter, Michael_Nania, myself, Ben W. Blessington. You already plugged the Jets X Factor stuff. So I guess we'll get out of here. Everybody enjoy the weekend. We got the Senior Bowl. Did anybody care about the Pro Bowl? Nobody really cared. I think we have the East-West Shrine Bowl as well. A lot of football this weekend, despite no Super Bowl. But I guess you can enjoy this as kind of another Jets game in a way. If the Jets go out or if the national team or whatever goes out and gets slaughtered by the Lions, I will feel pretty bad. So I hope the Jets coaches, can pull their weight this game. Would you put any stock into this game as all? Like if they come out and they're completely unprepared and all the rookies look like they have no idea what they're doing, is that an indictment on the Jets coaching staff? Is there something you can actually take away from this game?
I don't think so personally. And everything I heard about from the coaching staff is they're actually having these guys kind of bang around a little bit, and it seems like they're running from drill to drill, and everything's pretty well prepared. So you have a lot of guys there who have no interest in the Jets. Who are kind of speaking well about the Jets coaching staff. But the only thing to add about all the Pro Bowl stuff is I'm pretty sure there's like games in the Pro Bowl now. Like they have like dodgeball and stuff like that. Like I would rather watch that than the actual game. So that's
it's pretty bad. Like it's really.
I saw they kick
it's not run that well. Like they did a sprint and Tyreek Hill was in it, like a race, and he was just jogging, not even trying.
Oh,
it's all pretty cringe, honestly.
Yeah, never mind.
Well, never mind on that then. But
that's my review. You can make your own opinion.
That was a very on brand review from you, Michael. I think the thing with the Senior Bowl is it's a big week for, like you said, Joe. You mentioned like NFL circles and stuff. Like I think it's a big week for the Jets to get some respect on the league in terms of what they're doing with Saleh. And then it's like if they're on Hard Knocks, that's another, I guess, avenue that they could improve the PR among the NFL fans who all think that the Jets are a laughing stock. I mean, they're turning it around slowly. The more people who get exposed to Saleh, but we'll get out of here. Everybody enjoy their weekend. We'll be back next week. A lot of Jet stuff to talk about. So stay with us. All the Jet X podcasts, Blue Blitz, CYJ. So everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for listening. Go Jets.